Hello everyone. So in this video, I'm actually going to tell you about that yesterday when during the press conference there was one journalist who asked him that the US itself exports like majority of their fertilizers and chemical based fertilizers from Russia, and his response was completely naive. He just denied on the fact that he just said something like, oh, I don't know, I have to check or something like that. So you might have seen the double sided version that we are seeing of US right now, because initially US wanted us to replace China from the manufacturing point of line, but now when it is seeing the threat in that the India is showing, at least from the GDP percentage. I'm not talking about the market value, because the market value, like, obviously, like 6% of 4 trillion and 1.5% of 28 trillion, they are still ahead of us. But from the percentage wise, at least we are raising. The market value is less, but the percentage that we have, it is actually increasing, and they are not showing any signs. But the fact is that we are a $4 trillion, so even if 6% of 4 trillion is still less than 1.5% of 28 trillion. So he was disappointed by this fact that after US Russia, like Russia Ukraine war, what happened that the Russia was sanctioned heavily by all the NATO's and European Unions and USA heavily. And after that, what happened that when Russia started to realizes that it needs to divert its export to another countries to get its profit at a huge margin. So they started exporting to China and India. So now what you see is that India exports 40% of crude oil from Russia, and if you will see China export 42 to 43% of its crude oil from Russia. And now what is happening is that because USA knows that they cannot pressurize China. It's from the simple factors that the trade and the export and import between the difference, like the difference between export and import for US and China is so high that US cannot avoid or cannot afford to to lose that much money. If they will put like 50% tariffs on China, you have seen in February what happened. When he introduced this tariff bills for the first time, at that time he imposed 100% tariffs. And then you will see the Ministry of China, they retaliated with the same percentage of tariffs, and then the US retaliated, and in forth and back and forth, they increased the tariffs to 145%. But after that, what happened? He put the Donald Trump, which is the president of USA, he put a halt on the Chinese tariffs. And right now, if you also see, he extended the 90 days of tariff. He extended those 90 days of tariffs on China by again for the next 3 months. But with India, he knows, because the difference between export import in India and China is not that huge what is between China and US. So in India exports 77, and US imports like 24 or something. And then China exports 140, and USA exports like 30-35. So the difference between trade between US and China, and India and China, so US China is huge. So he cannot afford the same thing that he's doing with India with China, because the US citizens are heavily they are depend upon the Chinese products, same as the way we are dependent, because we import 140 billion dollars every year. And how much we export to China? 20, I think 23-24 billion dollars. I'm not accurate about that number, but it is something like that. So now what will happen is that he is not doing that thing with China, because he knows that the US cannot afford the tariffs that he will put against China, because China holds its own power. But he is doing this with India because he knows that India is not the epicenter of the global economy, right? I mean, we will become in future in the next 3 to 4 decades, but that's why he's trying to pressurize us and not China, because the trade difference between US China is huge. and the trade difference between India and US is it's also huge, but it's not as huge as it is between US and China. And that's why you're seeing that they have extended the tariffs for China for the next 90 days. It was earlier already extended for 90 days, and now it is again extended by 90 days. So I try to explain to you in this video that why China was not being imposed by all these tariffs, and why India is imposed by these tariffs. So in the next video I will try to explain you in much simpler words. Thank you so much for watching, and take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.